Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you are watching on YouTube, you can find out more information at officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion about media and virtual production. Any questions that you might have are fair game. Second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. Later today, we're going to be talking to Tuomo Kulomaa, and he is the creator of SPX-GC. This is a graphics system, HTML-based, HTML5-based graphics system that sits on top of CasparCG. And so he's going to be talking about how that works and what we can do with it and answering your questions. On Thursday, tomorrow, we'll be talking about Apple Keynote. They've released a new live video into Keynote. We're going to talk about what we can do with it, what we can't do with it, how we think we'll use it. So there'll be a lot of kind of discussion about that there. And on Friday, we're going to talk about camera matching with LUTs. So we're actually, it's something that Charles Klein and I started working on. And so Charles is going to join us and talk about how he does camera matching with LUTs. And so that's going to be coming up on Friday. Saturday, of course, is the longer day. We have education, which we don't stream. And then at noon, in a separate meeting, we're also going to have, it's the Belfast method, but Todd Reynolds will be actually running. So we'll be taking over his studio from all over the world, and he'll be playing the great music that Todd plays, and we'll get to listen to it and learn how to do that production. So stay tuned for that. All right, let's jump into the questions. Bill, what do we have?
The first one comes from Leo Mindell in Pinner in the UK and here on the panel. And Leo asks, I have a high-profile roundtable event with 5 people in just under 2 weeks. Recording is not live. And so the first question is, how big a venue do I need and suggested equipment to make it easier? And the second question is, anybody free to help?
Go ahead, Ken.
Yes, I'm free to help, Leo. And we've already spoke. Yeah.
Great, Leo.
So I've got a couple of examples of ones that I've looked at on YouTube, which to help them the conversation and to fill in. So I went through and tried to have a look at ways that other people have done this. So this is an example that I found, and as you can see, they've made a big gap between the talent. And then they run it through, and it's fairly straightforward how they're doing that one. But they've put, it seems like they're shooting from one side, even though there is, it's a roundtable discussion. The next one I looked at, and I thought was quite interesting, was they went on a square table, and if I can bring in the table shot, you can see that the table shot, sorry, that's going to go on to, no, I don't want that. There, so there's the table shot. And what I thought was interesting though, with the table shot was it was there, but you've got somebody's back. You're really hitting somebody very much like they're, so that person, whoever is sitting. And the problem I have with my event is that I've got 5 people, but they've got to have equal billing. Obviously, this one, you can see that there isn't equal billing because Obama is in there. So he's going to be the key focus. I looked at this one, another one where they did it much more relaxed around sofas. But again, it's that one, it's really, we're looking from one direction. This was a bit more on a table, but again, they've left a massive hole. I'm just showing these all. This was a very nice one in the respect that they're all round in the table and they're shooting around them. And I think this is they're shooting around them in each case, so there's equal billing for each person. And as you can see on the table itself, they're running it that way, so they're running through there. I'm nearly finished on my demos. This one, I really didn't like the way the cameraman was sitting in that picture. It just pulled everything to you saw the cameraman was there. Although everything else on this is super tight on that one. And then finally, we're back to this same sort of Hollywood Reporter way where they do it, where they leave a big hole and shoot from one side. So that was hopefully, I'm hoping, Alex, you're going to give us a completely different way of doing this.
I've shot a couple of these. I'll jump in real quick and then add it. So the way that we learned to do it from actually from Richard Branson. So Richard Branson had a very specific way that he liked to do it, and we kind of built from there, and then became very obsessed with a very specific way to do these. And so he likes to do them in the round, and he didn't even have a table. He would just have people sitting. If you look at his Disrupt series, you'll see a couple of those. And our very first time that we did it, which we thought it was a horrible idea, but we did it with I think Entrepreneurs, I think was the Disrupt that we did for him. And he did it in the round. That first one was a little rough. We only had a couple hours to set up, but we started refining it. And if you look at the Final Cut virtual user group, you'll see us kind of experimenting with that round table experience. So the good news is you're doing an odd number of people, which is what we found really works well. So what you do is you evenly space everyone around a round table, and then you shoot the gaps. So you put 5 cameras for 5 people, and those 5 cameras can be locked off on that person, or have some PTZs that have fine adjustment for them. They're sitting, they're not moving, and you'll get these great head and shoulder shots, much like we would have. It's as close to this that we have, but in the real world. There you can see us kind of setting those up. Now you could play a lot with the lighting. Now this one our system had a custom table. You'll see us, but we're all looking, and there's Bill, and you'll see Fenwick in here on some of these. But anyway, what we did here, that table was constantly changing, but that was because of the Wacom tablets. So essentially, we were shooting, those. You'll see that all those gaps are shot with close-ups, and our challenges you won't have, which is that we had to shoot over the Wacom tablets, and we had to kind of put it in there. So that was one of the challenges that we had in that. In that build. What I would recommend is pulling the cameras back a little bit, zooming in a bit, so that you can kind of compress that shot. And then if you want to add more detail, think about a jib, or even one thing that we didn't do that we wanted to do in the studio was hang an arm right above the table that went out at an angle and had a camera on it that was spinning. Very, very slowly, just put it on a motor so that it would spin around us. And if you get the angle just right, you won't see we did the test for it. We just didn't actually build the arm. But if you angled it right, you get this kind of overhead shot going around them that doesn't see the cameras that are shooting in. So at no time do the cameras really see each other unless you start getting into those kind of behind the person shots. I don't think that a lot of those kind of wider shots are that necessary to the thing, to it, but you could do it with that kind of higher shot, like kind of looking down. I liked having the globe in the center because it felt like a table, like it felt like you're at someone's house, So that was we did that a lot of different ways, but I think we kind of ended up with that's an Airstar, which does make a little bit of noise. So that was something we had to kind of filter out. But anyway, so that's how we approached it, and I really felt like it worked, for us.
What's interesting about this, Alex, is that this is 6 people, which you decide, and this was from Virtual User Group 3, and by the time you got to the end of it, you decided that an odd number was better. This is number 7.
And the reason that we did that was because we could shoot the gaps. That odd numbers are what we wanted it whenever possible, is that you can always put a camera between 2 people and get the other person across the table straight on, as they're looking at it.
I wonder if what we may need to do is actually do some B stock rolls to get the table view, because that doesn't give. From what I can see, you're going to end up shooting each person individually and very little of a table roll, because you had a lot of stuff on the table, which is distracting.
That was harder for us, but
clean table, yeah.
If you had a clean table or you had them sitting around, you could definitely capture some wider shots of them. And again, ours was designed for live, so it was designed to be. Yeah. This is the way it's going to look, and you could definitely do some other inserts and so on and so forth. The further the cameras are out, and if you have more spot lighting, kind of a Charlie Rose style, they'll fall into the background pretty quickly. So you won't see them very much either.
And my question in there is how much floor space do you think you need to do this?
That was about that space that you saw that shot in, I think, was about 35 by 35 feet. So yeah, about a little over 10 meters. That's square.
Exactly the space we were looking at.
Yeah. So that was, it was tight to do it inside of that space, but it definitely can be done. And again, but that worked out really well. The wide shots are kind of nice. It's the wider shots are more of legacy of how we're used to making shows. so having, a couple wide shots here and there is fine for flavor, but really what you want to see are the expressions as if you were sitting there watching. When you're sitting at the table watching, you don't have a wide shot. So that's what we really got into. So we just very rarely went to those wide shots because we really wanted that kind of close-up experience as if you're sitting there. And we did one where we had 4 people and we put a Ozo in one of the people's space, like a 360. That worked pretty well too. So it's like you're sitting there. It literally put the VR goggles on it, like it's as if you were sitting at the table because you just sit there and look at whoever's talking because it just isn't moving. So it's one of the few 360 things that I was really happy with. Like, I could sit here and watch this because it's like it's as if you're at the table, with them. So it's a very personal experience. Anyway, sorry, I kind of ran on there. Go ahead, Noah.
Yeah, a lot of good stuff there. I would have pointed out Hollywood Reporter too as a reference, but lighting obviously is a huge deal to what you're doing. So I did a YouTube show where we had people playing D&D tonight, or D&D at a table, and so we had a single light in the center, kind of like what Alex did with a lantern, and so just cutting between the two. This was also a live show. But yeah, lighting is going to be key, and the distance obviously between your subjects and the background is going to make the difference. That was one of our only wide shots there. The problem with wide shots, kind of like Alex was pointing out, was you basically get sides or back of the heads at certain points. So relying on those other close-up cameras tends to be the preferred way to do it, I would think. And I also think that sorry, I lost my train of thought. You can go to the next person.
Go ahead, George.
So Leo, I just did something last week, not more of a roundtable, but I'm gonna speak as far as gear. So as far as venue, if you're looking for somewhere, I would try to find somewhere that has the space not only for you to do the setup and for folks to move around freely. Also, maybe they already have the gear in that space. I would suggest I use three C300 last week. I love Blackmagic, but it was just easy to dial up those C300s as far as color into a few Kai Pro decks. So if you have to do ISO records, I would go for the Kai Pros because they're just easy to set up. But I'm just going to join that piece right now and I try to go on.
And go ahead, Sky.
John Favreau did this in 2005 on Arts A&E channel called Dinners for Five. You can see them on YouTube, and they did a whole, I think, 3 seasons of this concept. So he also did that same exact concept in the behind the scenes of the making of The Mandalorian. So you can find that on the Disney Channel. Disney Plus.
Yeah, Bill?
Also, just as a point of view from the participant, I thought that was one of the easiest panel discussions I ever participated in, because you always knew where to look, and it was at the person you were talking to or talking about. And I think after the establishing shot, the audience kind of understands who's to my right, who's to my left. So it just was really organic feeling in a way that it hasn't been on a lot of, I'm on a stage on a panel, and I'm speaking mostly to the audience rather than to real people in front of me. I liked that about it.
Yeah. No?
Yeah, to Bill's point too, that's what I was missing is once you've established the placement of everything, then the 180 degree you can kind of break that rule because you're in the round at that point.
Yeah. And it was just, I think for us with Final Cut User Group, it was just one of those things that you just felt like you're having the conversation. You forgot everything else really, really fast, as Bill said, is just, you're just in the conversation. And I think that when you open up that at all, you're talking kind of this weird across the table thing. Whereas when you do it this way, when you put everybody equidistant around and you shoot those gaps, they just comfortably, it's as if they were sitting at any other table at any other time, and it's the way that they would naturally do that. And I really felt like it was it was an idea that when it was brought to us, we thought was a horrible idea. And I didn't like it at all. And then became completely obsessed with the model. So next question.
Noah Sargent's up next from Fullerton, California. And Noah says, Alex, what do you use for monitoring hearing the panel on office hours?
So I normally use now I can't remember the name of the company.
Audio implements.
The tiny ones.
No, I'm now using the Bumblebee in-ears. And for some reason, the name isn't popping into my head at the moment. I got a lot of moving parts here this morning. I don't know why. did buy these. These were based on a conversation yesterday, and they showed up late last night. Amazon, I think, now decides it can just come at 11 o'clock at night. These are the XS. I think these are XSZs. These are the ones that George recommended. I actually took them out right before the show. We started late, and the reason I took them out was because I could hear so much that everything in my room was confusing. It was distracting. So I think for audio work, I might actually play with them a little bit. They're really bassy, so I have to kind of get a bass line against some of my other microphones. But they're really interesting. They're only $60. These are more. I think $200 or $300. But these are really comfortable. I leave them in. I mean, I'm in them almost all day, and so they work well. These are the Bumblebee, and I can't. It's the in the ear 2 or whatever, but they're really good. Next question. Oh, go ahead, Leo.
So a slightly different approach is these ones, which is the aftershocks, the bone connected ones. So the key thing is I have to turn down my side tone and turn it off, because obviously my ears aren't blocked. So I don't need side tone to hear myself. So
right,
if you are so used to hearing side tone and then you suddenly don't have it, it's a bit challenging. But actually, once you get used to it, it's like you can regulate your voice better, sort of.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Lucas Herzog is up next from Mainz, Germany. When having Zoom in full screen mode to scrape the output, I get this bright yellow active speaker border when multi-highlighting or in grid view. Is there a way to deactivate this?
Go ahead, Chris.
I don't believe there is a way to deactivate it, Lucas, but you can. I would recommend, and stop by after hours sometime. I will walk you through how I'm using Zoom ISO to scrape screens, and you can turn off everything in Zoom ISO. You can turn off the names, and the yellow active thing doesn't come up. So it's a great way to scrape screens for recording.
Next question.
Next question comes from Noah Sargent, Fullerton, California. Noah has an interesting one here. What was the hardest day of your career?
Go ahead, Leo.
So my core business has always been running websites, and one of those was when we 24 hours before the European Rugby Cup launched, we were doing some stuff, and a semicolon got missed off a page that was committed, took out the server, literally burnt the server to death. And we were lying on the floor at 3 a.m, I was just lying on the floor, staring at the ceiling going, what have I done with my life? And amazingly, the client was like receptive. We got around it, we got past it, and they're still a client 20 plus years later.
Wow, that's amazing. Jason?
Roswell, New Mexico had a 250,000-acre ranch to shoot in a day that was forecasted to be somewhere around 115 degrees. On the way out of Roswell, my drone buddy and I were straight up just destroyed, like hit by a car, to the point where it's a good thing we were in a bigger car, because the other one completely flipped over. They ran a red. We then dealt with all the things you do when you're in a car accident, and then had a 12-hour shoot. That was a very sore day.
Go ahead, Doug. Is Doug here? Go ahead, Ari.
So I spent about a decade setting up and running a company in India, and it was a very difficult day when I decided to pull the plug and terminate the operation. I remember terminating everyone and literally taking boxes full of hardware that we had designed and dumping them on the corner of the street where the trash was collected, and closing down the operation. That was a difficult day.
Yeah. Nigel?
It may seem obvious, but lived in New York, so 9/11 is still the hardest week for everybody, because, you know, we had colleagues and friends that worked in the buildings. Other than that, I have to tell you, and I know it's not really a technical one, but I had a boss who died at work, and that is, and the whole team reported to me, and I reported to him, and that was a rough few days.
Yeah, I had to lay off my whole staff one day, so that was rough. Still rough. Next question.
Richard Lavery, Belfast in the UK, is up next with, what does the panel think about Canon's dual fisheye EOS R lens for 3D VR?
Go ahead, Jason.
It's a neat trick. That's the nicest thing I can say about it. Generally, I despise fisheye for every sort of this kind of thing. I prefer the 8mm actual bottle cap so that it's perfectly spherical. But yeah, it's a neat trick.
Go ahead, Stuart.
Well, there's the lens on the front of the camera. It is a $2,000 lens, and the only camera it works on is a $4,000 camera. Now, I'm just going to quickly swap to another. These are both genuine Canon videos, by the way. So that's the view you get through the lens. So you're wasting a heck of a lot of your 8K sensor the moment you use it. I would think for the money, if you're doing this sort of work, you could probably do better off by getting 2 identical cameras with 2 identical lenses, and you would then just worry about keeping them in sync.
Yeah, that's really the issue. So keeping them in sync. This is something that I've done a lot of in this area. And so the downside of having a lens that's totally put together like this is that you can't adjust the interaxial distance, which is the perceived interocular distance. Now, the advantage is that it's probably set, looking at it, it's probably set very close to the average human interocular distance, which is, I can't remember that off the top of my head, but it's a, so a lot of times we make those adjustments when we're doing it, because if you're taking a wide shot, like of a big scene, we might open them up a little bit. I've done ones where my cameras were, 2 feet, 3 feet apart to magnify the 3D effect of a larger scene. But the one thing that you have a lot of trouble with cameras is getting them to align perfectly and then getting them close enough together. And so there have been a lot of, artsy versions of this and really cheap versions of this. This is the first time that we've seen one that is a really high res. Now, what they generate, you may look at it like a lot of black space, but what they're generating is a stereo 4K image that's all on one piece. So all you need is something that can process that one frame. Everything's in sync. Everything, is lined up. It's from a, to do it, shoot it and then do post on it. This, using a camera like this, would be actually much simpler for a lot of pieces. And this is, a lot of reasons that we don't do stereo when we do 180 is because this alignment is really hard to do on an ongoing basis in a live environment where you have to set up in a regular system. Like you have to jump in. So having this kind of system that would allow you to push this through the entire system as one frame that stays together is actually pretty good. I mean, I have to admit that I know that it seems like a trick, but for me, I saw it and I was like, I need to buy that camera and I need to buy that lens and I have a bunch of friends that I work with that are probably buying these by the dozen, because this solves a huge problem for a lot of us that have been doing stereo 180 for the last decade. Next question.
Noah Sargent's up next from Fullerton, California, and he asks, how do you typically ring out a room for audio?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Well, there's a lot of devices that you can use to get a proper RT60, but frankly, I use these two devices and these two devices. I just clap my hand and listen to the reverberation, and it'll give me a really fast feeling for the room, how loud it is, how live it is, what it needs to be done. Of course, it won't work in a concert hall, but it works great for most conferences.
Go ahead, Bill.
I start exactly the same place he does. Clap in the room, listen. Then you want to put up your first order of diffusion or whatever you're going to do to moderate problems that you heard. If you heard slapback echo and things like that, you're going to use what you've learned through theory to try to put some things in. Then you're going to listen again. And so it's kind of like do I need to add more salt to the soup? It's not I listen to it, I understand I'm going to do it, and it's going to be finished. Every time I've tried to get a room as close as I can to being really good for audio, it's taken about a week to 2 weeks for me just to get used to the room and what's going on. The other tool I use is a filter that I can notch out the Q on specific frequencies. I can do a recording and then one by one make them narrow and sweep it and see if I can find places where the room really does resonate. And if you can, and then abate those. That'll help you get rid of really big problems that you may not have known were there.
Go ahead, Stuart.
Okay, everyone so far has dealt with recording. So I'm going to deal with doing live performance, and it's a different technique for ringing out a room. You start by putting a microphone roughly in the center where the audience is going to sit. You have your speakers on, you have your amp on, you need a 32-band graphic equalizer, and you need a white noise generator. Now, what you're listening for is when...
pink noise?
Generally white noise. Okay. Right? And that's really a subjective choice. Some people prefer the pink. Mm-hmm. I prefer the white. But again, you're running the equalizer levels up and down until you get feedback in each frequency range. And you'll hear that as a tone. So it won't be feedback that's just wild feedback. It'll sound like a bell, a really clear ring at the frequency, and then just bring the level back down and then go to the next one and then go to the next one and go to the next. You'll end up with a equalizer that's got a wave that matches the response of the room. And as long as you don't exceed the sound pressure level you needed for feedback, you will never get feedback. One thing to note though, an empty room and a room with an audience have a completely different characteristic. You do this with an empty room and then you can push the levels up when the crowd are in. So it's not a tool for virtual events.
Mm-hmm. Let's go to the next question.
Okay, moving on to Ari Block in Tel Aviv, Israel. And Ari says, what would be the best way to insert a VST plugin into the audio chain of a PC using a USB microphone in a way that is transparent to the user?
Go ahead, Beiju.
Okay, I'll start off that if it was a Mac, we would all probably say the same answer, audio hijack and loopback. On Windows, there are a few options, but the easiest one I found, which is, again, there's nothing completely transparent, especially as using a USB microphone. Otherwise, it would be just put it externally, hardware-wise. But I found that using actually vMix, even the free version of vMix works really well. You can put a VST plugin into it, save a project file, just launch it and minimize it, and it works pretty well. And I haven't found it being crashed by any VST plugins, which I have found with OBS or with some of the other options.
Rotem?
So you have Potato. You can run VST through Potato. And I had good experience with OBS. Like Beiju said, he had crashes, but you can route just the speaking side through OBS, and you can put any VST you want that you have in your computer.
Go ahead, Ari.
Yeah, this is, first of all, the use case is for a woman that is not technically capable of handling hardware and stuff like that. That would be an overkill. I've used it in OBS because, and I don't want to disrupt the workflow. It's such a situation that there is something that works and she knows what to click and that's it. So OBS does work. Loopback, audio hijack, that would be great, but it's a PC. So I was hoping for something else, but I guess not.
Yeah. I have a question for everyone. Are we hearing audio breakup or is it just me? No, I'm hearing a lot of our audio breakup. Is it clean for everybody else?
Seems clean.
Yeah, seems clean.
Okay, great. Then it's me. I'm gonna leave, come back in, and see if I did something to push my computer really hard, and I may not have let go of all the memory. So I'll be back in just a minute. Go ahead and just keep running with it, Bill.
Absolutely, no problem. So the next question, let's see, we got through Ari Block, so everybody's clear on that one. So let's move on. The next question is from Noah Sargent in Fullerton, California. And he says, they say you're the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with. That's a great phrase. Besides your family, is the office hour community in your top 5? We're going to start with Jason Bache, and go ahead, Jason.
You know, I actually had to think about this one, and as long as Office Hours has been going, I will never forget, it's kind of a flashbulb memory in my head. The very first Apple event we watched together, I remember thinking very distinctly like that I had actually completely forgotten about COVID for the first time in, I don't know, at that point, maybe 6 months. And it was an absolutely transcendent experience. So yes, I would say, yeah, saved my girlfriend and, saved my girlfriend probably.
Pretty engaging place. Sky.
So my phrase of that is we are the people we meet. And I went on an adventure 40 years ago to learn who I was. And so to be comfortable in my own skin is a thing that I'm still doing. And that Beju is here now is a part of who I am from 561 days ago when we first met. And then Ari, that I just met less than 2 weeks ago, and that we spent 3 hours together figuring out a problem, and that Rupert and I have joined together and tried to figure something out, and that Mitchell is just a funny way to say Mitch Hill. I don't know. But again, that we are the people we meet. This is a community that I'm very grateful to be a part of. I'm also part of, my own blood family, but the connections Chris Fenwick refers to, an affinity group. So Doug Ferguson and I will have drinks together someday, not sure how, and Bickies will be had by Stuart, I'm sure. So Noah, that's a brilliant question. And Bill, you're an awesome host, and I'm grateful to be a part of this Venn diagram of my existence.
Nigel, go ahead.
So I suspect the answer is yes. I'll give you my sense is, particularly from after hours, I reference conversations with my wife who stares at me blankly. For people I seem to feel a lot of a connection to that she has never met. So that's when I also think you could ask the question, is office hours in the top 5 of your discretionary income spending brackets? And that may also be an issue.
Ken Jordan's next.
Yeah, saying in the top 5, it's obviously for me, well, the last year or so, it's the top 1. My family comes second to this, the amount of time spent here and in after hours.
Steve, no, who is it that's next? Ari Block is the last one on our list.
So definitely, this is one of my favorite sentences, and I take it as to surround yourself with people that you can look up to and learn from, and that will elevate you. And I find all of that and more in office hours, and I'm very grateful. So yes.
Okay, we're going to move on to the next question, but we're going to have a little kerfluffle here because I have the operator control, but I do not have a way to put people in line, or at least I haven't been schooled on how to put people in line. So we may have to go back to our physical hands for just a little bit until Alex rejoins us. But we can still do the question. And the question from Steve Bauer in Seattle is, with all the variations of USB-C, wouldn't an OWC Thunderbolt 4 cable cover all the bases, charging all data and so forth? So if you would like to weigh in on this one, let's go to Jason, then Mitchell, then George. So Jason, you're up.
The short answer is yes. And the reason that it didn't come out when USB-C was codified 5-6 years ago is, well, who knows? It just didn't exist.
Mitchell, go ahead.
I had it in my head that since I like the OWC line, and that's just me, and I was buying their docks and hubs, that it made sense to use their USB cables, mainly because their big claim to fame is that it's totally compatible between USB-C and Thunderbolt. So I sort of committed to them, and they've sort of served me well. Doesn't mean they're the only one ball game in town, but it worked out for me.
And George Kennedy.
I have switched over to USB 4 for any new cables I'm buying. OWC just works for me. I haven't had any issues.
Excellent. Okay, moving on to the next question then. Comes from Douglas Carmichael, and he says, in an article I read that the peak power consumption in the New York City Theatre District is 161 megawatts for all of the theaters and video displays. Would most of that be from older conventional lights and HVAC systems? So,
I'm back.
I see. Nope, there you go.
I've returned.
Great.
All
Excellent.
the audio is much better now. So anyway, go ahead, Stuart.
Yeah, if the lighting systems in those are using incandescent, yes, it will chew a heck of a lot of power. One would hope that such a prestiged area of theatre would have been switching to LED lighting by now and helping save the planet. After that, yes, heating, venting, air conditioning, and you need those systems to work because those systems don't just function to keep people warm, they function to keep people safe if there's a fire. Right? So yeah, if they're chewing power, you just live with it. After that comes things like all of the computers and engines running, sets flying in and out. But yeah, those are about the right order.
Next question.
Next question comes from Matt King in Tustin, and Matt asks, or note, he's been trying to share his desktop and video via the ATEM into Teams, but the resolution is too low via the camera input. Any recommendations for improving the video quality there?
Go ahead, Stuart. We can't hear you, Stuart.
Okay, I forgot where the button was for a second. I've got one concern about this question, but I'll say one of the alternate routes is to use a tool like vMix Desktop Capture into NDI virtual input and go that way. But what I'm looking at when I'm reading it is thinking, hang on, the ATEM is a HD mixer and you're outputting HD into Zoom or Teams or the like. To me, that actually says that the details on the desktop are too small. So the text size and the graphic size, and there's too much detail, and you might need to resize those to match what you're outputting rather than the other way around.
Noah?
Yeah, you said ATEM. I'm assuming mini, kind of like what Stuart's saying. You might go in your system preferences and check the scaling for what you're outputting. But depending on your ATEM and which line you have, you might be outputting at 4K and it's scaling down to 1080 or something like that. That can happen on the higher end switchers. So make sure that your format is the same across the board. For the ATEM mini line, it's all 1080p. So I would match your output to 1080p, and then secondly, check on the scaling.
Yeah, go ahead, Ken.
Just host, please, Alex.
Oh, yep. And Nigel?
Yeah, I'd be interested if someone can explain to me on Teams how to work out to see what quality of signal I'm getting. But I have to tell you, I go from my ATEM into Ecamm, and I put Ecamm into Teams as a virtual camera, and that's the way I do it. And you have to remember, the person, when you do that, has to spotlight you, so that will take up a majority of the screen on Teams.
Yeah, and I'll echo Stuart's, is that if you're having trouble reading it, yeah, if your screen is over 1080p, you really should think about everybody else that's going to be watching it. It may look fine for you, but it may not look fine for them. It may be hard for them to read. And changing the text size makes a big difference. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next, and he asks, are there specific techniques for managing large crowds in mass gatherings or emergency situations? I know there are courses specifically in crowd management. Would that be a second hour topic, perhaps?
Go ahead, Stuart.
Just talking from a security side, because I used to be a licensed security officer to pay bills. You start with, and just in emergency stuff. So this isn't getting people into events and what have you. This is getting crowds clear. You start with vocal commands, like a spoken word, and then a loudspeaker, and then you move to things like tear gas and fire hoses if it gets really bad. But getting people into things is easier because they want to. Getting them out is harder and it's stressful, and you basically want to have the training to do that job, not just be attempting to do it for an.
Go ahead, Rotem.
So in Israel, it's like specialty, or
speciality.
Yeah, specialty.
Specialty. You had it.
No. So it's like an occupation. So you need to know how much like square meters there is on the venue. And according to the square meters, you need to know how many exits do you have, and how many entries do you have, and how many security do you need, and do you need this kind of fencing or big fencing or small. It's more than an hour to figure it out.
It's pretty complex, and when we work on large events, we spend a lot of time thinking about how that would work. There's usually a security detail that's kind of figuring that out. I handle my crew quite separately. Is generally we will devise an egress that is not the same as the main crowd, because in the things that I've worked on where we worry about some kind of kinetic event. We don't want to be at the second kinetic event. So we usually have a reverse egress that goes exactly the opposite of where the crowd goes, which is against what the security folks tell us to do. But we don't want to be in the main area where everyone's leaving at the same time. Next question.
Louis Herzog in Mainz, Germany says, does anyone participate in IBC's digital offerings, and what are your opinions on the provided content so far?
I didn't even know that there was digital offerings. So I guess I saw some stuff for IBC go by on my email, but I didn't see that. And I've spoken there, so I think I'm on some mailing list, but I didn't realize that it was happening right now. So if there is, we should look at it and see how it looks. Next question.
Stephen Bauer in Seattle says, with all the variations of USB-C, wouldn't an OWC Thunderbolt 4 cable cover all the bases?
We totally covered that one.
Yeah, I think that's the right. I mean, the Thunderbolt 4 is the way to go. I mean, I'm trying to just have everything connected to something through Thunderbolt 4. Like that USB-C, I just think is it's chaos.
Only they weren't $40 each.
Still, it's just there's my time and things actually working. Next question.
Stuart in Melbourne, Australia here on the panel is up next, and he says a friend was gifted with an Apple laptop. Her media hard drive is an NTFS drive the Mac can't see. The best tool I can recommend to her to migrate her media to the Mac, and aren't Macs at least supposed to read NTFS?
Go ahead, Jason.
They're absolutely supposed to read NTFS, but they can get really goofy with various USB to SATA interfaces. So I would first try a couple of those. And if that doesn't play nice, then Paragon Software makes a beautiful little piece of kit called NTFS for Mac.
Go ahead, Rodham.
Transfer everything to exFAT, like other disk, and then put it in the Mac.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Run into problems with NTFS. You don't have a problem reading, but you have a problem writing to it or having writing permissions. So that's what usually gets in the way of using NTFS on a Mac.
Go ahead. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next, and he says, if I were interested in creating soundtracks for video and my DAW doesn't support video on the timeline, would video sync, and he has a link there, locked to the DAW suffice for that job?
I'm afraid I'm not familiar with that product, so I think you might have.
I love that domain name, though, nonlethalapplications.com.
Yeah, it's good. It's a good domain name, but I don't know what that is. So we'll have to come back to that. Next question.
Guy Cochran in Seattle, Washington is up next. Could you use Facebook's Live Producer to push lower thirds graphics remotely into someone else's production?
Go ahead, Rotem.
So I think it was this morning, like your night at the US, that we played with it on After Hours, and Guy it didn't start live. It just opened the Facebook Live interface. He did a producer live graphics. And then he gave me the address of the graphics. He pushed a button and in Seattle, and I'm here in Israel, and I saw the graphic like immediately with no latency. It was really good.
Leo?
So the idea of this was it was actually a third party that Facebook got hold of and they bought it in. It isn't actually an original native thing that was designed just to work in Facebook. In fact, it's really weird how it works because it works better when you've got something like OBS to bring it in. And you produce the graphics there, then you put them into OBS and then you bring them back into Facebook. And it's like, where's the interaction and the integration? It's great. It's just a keyed online graphic system, but I haven't used it much.
Yep. Stuart?
Just for redundancy and safety, I would suggest no, because if their servers go down, you don't have a service. So you're better off using something local to bring your graphics in.
Facebook never goes to, oh, wait a minute.
Next question.
Danny Law in Malaysia, and I'm hoping I'm doing this right because he has MADI, and I'm wondering if it's MIDI because he's talking about audio, but you'll figure it out, I'm sure.
No, it's MADI.
MADI, it is MADI. Yeah. So there's, okay. Well, looking at the Blackmagic Design Constellation, it shows it has one MADI in and two MADI outs. I'm assuming this MADI input is from an external source like a sound console. How do you mix this MADI audio as a broadcast mix?
I have to admit that I don't use the MADI or I don't use the audio inside the Constellation almost ever. So I'm a little less familiar. One of the main reasons is the Constellation will bring, I believe it's either 32 or 64 channels in via MADI, but it'll only put 2 out. So it does the stereo mix out. It's because of that, it kind of has, we lost interest. so in trying to figure it out. So we haven't used it that heavily, but it should be able to allow you to bring in a bunch of those channels. They'll all show up they should show up in individual audio channels inside of the Constellation with a MADI input, and then you can mix them down. You'd mix them like any other thing that you might mix inside of it, but it should be independent audio channels that are derived from MADI that are being delivered. And again, I can't remember how many channels, because when it didn't have an equal number of in and outs, we stopped looking at it. So next question.
Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania is interested in speedtest.net, speedof.me, and so forth, and asks, what are your favorite internet diagnostic websites or apps? What are the key parameters needed to assess trouble sources to the client versus their ISP, including latency, jitter, packet loss, and so forth?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I'll answer the first question. The application that shows you had the fastest speed.
I use speedtest.net for the most part because it actually doesn't show the fastest speed. So it's the most, if I'm going to show someone like it's the most conservative of the bunch of them, which I feel safer by. I'd rather know what I have rather than be optimistic. Go ahead, Baishu.
Yeah, speedtest.net is obviously the first step, but after that, to diagnose stuff and to actually see what the connection is like, I actually started using Ping Plotter a lot. Tucker turned me on to that and found it's really, really useful.
Oh, that's great. Very good. And we do it with, a lot of what we do is we test those things. Then we want a router that's capable of telling us giving us telemetry data back of what it's doing. So for us, the Meraki will tell us what we're doing, and then we start streaming. And we push it as hard as we can with a lot of feeds and everything else, and then we let it run for a day. And then what we're looking at is the graph of how it works over a longer period of time. Next question.
Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana, up next with, does anyone have a recommendation for a highly directional speaker?
Meyer Audio. Meyer speakers have I don't know what but they're probably some of the most directional that we've worked with in an environment. They're not the least expensive speakers that you can buy. I think that would be the safe thing to say. But there are other ones that I think part of what you have to think about is how big of a space you're trying to be directional in. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, and just to understand that mid and up frequencies can be a little more directional. Low end tends to be omni no matter how you create it. That's why you hear the boombox going by in the car in the whole neighborhood. It gets through everything, and it's hard to direct.
There are some that I'm just not familiar with enough that sit over top of when we go to events, and there's a speaker that's right over top of you, and literally until you walk up to it, you can't hear it, and then when you're under it, it's perfectly clear, and then you walk away. But that's for a person to look at something. But I haven't used them enough to know. Next question.
Brody Hafner in New York City says, is there a USB-C cable tester that can confirm data and power functionality and transmission capacity?
I don't know about power. I have to admit that the way that I test cables is that I have some drives that I know the speed of. These are NVMe based drives, and I know that they should hit about 900 megs a second when they're connected to the cable. And I plug the cable in, and I do a Blackmagic speed test on them, and I see if I get the speed. It's usually a binary thing. It's either all the way to what I need or like 30 megs a second. Go ahead, Jason.
Get out of my head, Alex. Yes, there are some that will do it. Monoprice, I think I picked up specifically power. Generally, I will test older laptops, especially over time. You can get drops. But yeah, as far as I'm concerned, there is absolutely no substitute for a true torture test.
Next question.
Bo Cordell in Charleston, South Carolina, up again with any good recommendations for an under $100 hair light.
Go ahead, Stuart.
I was just looking up where to find the right one on the Bunnings website. An MR16 type LED globe, which is a dichroic replacement globe, sitting in a floor stand light, and that would be, let's say, probably 75 Australian. So that's about 50 US.
Rotem?
I have Yuyongu lights. There is like million types of light like that. And like on this kind of setup, if you pull it like right on on your head, great.
Sorry, I got mine wrong. Go ahead, Mitchell.
I'm not sure I'm getting my money's worth on hair lights, but oops, this side. I use a LEDGO LG E298, which is right behind me. Also, Nan Lights has a nice line, and they're not that expensive.
Yeah. Bill?
I use newer 160s. The old 160s, I've got a couple of them up here, just giving you that little bit of rim around there. It really doesn't have to be super expensive. It doesn't have to be super color accurate. You just want to separate yourself from the background with a traditional rim light. Sometimes it's good to gel them a little bit if they're too warm or cold, but you can really get by with practically anything above you.
When I'm on the road, I'm either using the Nanlite LumaPad 25s, which are just a little over $100, or the PavoTube 2 6Cs, which are a little under $100. And they're the nice thing about the PavoTubes is they're easy to pack, and they're little magnets, and they all stick together as like a little clump, and you throw them in your bag. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael says, when reading about, my alma mater, there's two Douglas Carmichaels, got my eye fooled. My alma mater is planning, COVID willing, to hold a small 1,057 capacity concert with an area band. It was mentioned that the lighting director liked to play the console like an instrument versus just executing cues. Would that preclude fully remote production?
That's oftentimes, I mean, it can be a mixture of both of those things. You can have a bunch of stuff that's automated that is going to be cued based on pieces there, and then they can by hand affect other things that they want to kind of, again, dance with what's actually happening. So we see oftentimes a mix of those pieces. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael back again. When reading about the Facebook outage, it was mentioned that the company is probably scrambling private jets. As someone not familiar with that word, would getting one on short notice be as easy as an Uber or a Lyft? And could it be done with an app?
Go ahead, Nigel.
So that end of the world, my guess is Facebook probably either has private jets or probably has access to permanently leased private jets. And the answer is, from the right amount of money, anything is possible. And at some point, you want the person who messed up in the room fixing it.
Next question. Go ahead, Bill, real quick.
I was just going to say, in that high rarefied private jet thing, there are also timeshares for private jets that 4 or 5 corporations will get together, and in an emergency, you get it.
And that, I'm sure that was written by a journalist who has no idea what they're talking about. Like, there's nobody's doing that. No one's scrambling any jets. They're just journalists being stupid. Next question.
Henry Ramos, Yonkers, New York. Client wants to use a lavalier on a talent who will be walking around the room with the PA system. Have a Shure lav kit, would a unidirectional lav help? And if so, what models might be recommended?
Go ahead, Jason.
Of course they do. I would say that what's going to matter more. So the first answer is yes, a unidirectional would be better. But what's going to matter more is where and how the PA is pointed. And I would, just do a couple tests and put some tape on the floor and say, past this line, just so you know, you're in the danger zone.
Go ahead, Bill.
And lavs are fine, but that's still a foot away from your mouth. If you really want gain before feedback, put them in a headset mic so that capsule's right at their mouth. That'll make your life much easier.
Go ahead, Noah.
I'd really push for a handheld in that situation, and then see if you can get your client on site for a physical test. That way they can see how bad it feeds back when it does.
And when they demand to have it, I think the one that we've used in the past is, I think, a WL185 from Shure. It's a very, very large capsule, and it's very directional. And if they bump it and turn it sideways, you're done. So make sure to nearly glue it to where it needs to go go towards them. But that's what we've used in the past when we're not using a headset. All right. We are about to change direction here. Hopefully our guest of honor is available. So let's see. Oh, there he is. Tuomo Kulomaa. There we go. Hello, Tuomo. It's good to have you here. So Tuomo Kulomaa is the creator of, and I have to look at it every single time. The name is very difficult for me to have a bunch of initials that I have a hard time with. But tell us a little bit about the product that you've put out, and you're showing it to us right now on your screen, right?
Yes, I am. The product is a browser-based graphics controller for live video production. Mm-hmm. And the reason why I originally developed it is the reason behind it is that I have been working in broadcast graphics for about 20 years now, more than 20 years. I have been using all the big systems, the very expensive real-time 3D systems and 2D systems, and in channel branding, news graphics, all sorts of productions. And at one point, I started to tinker around with development. So I was a graphic designer originally. Then I slowly started to do some scripting, software development. And about a year and a half ago, I was given a sort of like a challenge from the Finnish public broadcaster YLE to figure out a browser-based tool for them to be used in broadcast production along with web-based production at the same time. So there would be only one single user interface, and it would control two kinds of workflows. One for the SDI workflow, the very traditional broadcast workflow, and the other one would be for streaming. And before that, they had two workflows, so double the staff, and this became my challenge. And I started to think about it, and we released that application with YLE as an open source project. And during the development, I started to think that maybe there would be an opportunity to make a more open version of it, to become sort of like a platform or an ecosystem even for very fast, high quality graphics, live graphics for professionals. So that was the thinking behind it.
And it is, so it's called SPX-GC is the name of the application.
I'm going to explain it why.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about the name that I have. I will get good at it. A year from now, we'll be we'll just use SPX-GC. But right now, every time I think of it, I'm like, my brain does not keep all those letters in there.
I know. Everybody has the same problem or challenge. So the reason why it's called SPX-GC is that it's my company is called SmartPX. SPX, right? And GC comes from graphics controller. So now you know it. Now you remember it. SmartPX graphics controller. Right. And these two characters, G and C, are used heavily in graphics, but the other way around. So CG for character generator. Right. So there's that. But branding is hard.
Well, can you and how is it related to CasparCG?
Right. So GC, as I like to call it.
And we should probably back up and tell people go ahead, if you can explain a little bit to people what CasparCG is.
Yes, CasparCG is an open source video server which you can install onto Windows machines, at least. I'm not sure if there are other ones, but at least on a Windows. And it can play back video, HD video on several layers using NDI and SDI outputs. And it has a built-in browser for graphics. Traditionally, the graphics in CasparCG has been Flash-based, but it is slowly, of course, since Flash has been now.
It was a great idea when when it was started. When Caspar was started, it was a great idea. Like, there's lots of Flash animators. Let's just make it something that they can just output the graphics, and then the iPhone came out.
Yeah, exactly. So now we don't have Flash, but we have HTML, and HTML as a specification has improved quite a bit over the years, and it is super capable of doing all kinds of visual things. Like it can use shaders, 3D objects, even it's super powerful what it can do. And nowadays, quite a lot of CasparCG users are slowly gravitating to HTML-based graphics for obvious reasons. And so GC as a graphics client or graphics control application, it has two control mechanisms built into it. One is just browser-based workflow where basically you have the server, the SPX-GC server gives a URL. You can put that URL into any browser and it's going to display the graphics which are being controlled by the application. And the other workflow is by using CasparCG's internal command interface. So it has an API, you can talk to it, and it can load up graphics onto different layers, and it can play those out using CasparCG's own command interfaces. So there are two workflows going out from GC.
And are you able to show us the interface? Are you set up for that?
Oh yes,
there?
yes.
So great. And if you have questions, for folks who are watching, if you have questions as we start to work on it, we'll jump into the questions in about 10 or 15 minutes. So go ahead and start stacking those up, and go ahead, Tuomo.
Right. So I have prepared some examples here, but first let me show you some like basically what the setup today is. So let me load up a slide using, of course, the graphic system. So this is actually a slide which comes from Google Slides. So I could give you the URL for the slides and you could move those things around. But so basically today what we have in the bottom left, we have the local server running on my PC. I'm using OBS as my streaming application. So in OBS, I'm using a browser source, and I have added this renderer URL into that browser source. So it's going to show up in OBS as a layer, a fully transparent layer. And I'm using virtual camera, which is connected to Zoom. I also have a local CasparCG running here. So it is actually playing out all those graphics through CasparCG to their, what they called a screen consumer.
And both of these are being controlled by the same central controller. So when you hit something, it's going out to both the screen and to the virtual camera at the same time.
Yes, correct.
Got it.
We also have another GC instance running in the cloud. So if we have the time, we are going to do a little interactive demo. I'm going to give you some buttons to click, and you should be able to control graphics at my end here in Finland.
That's great.
So we'll see about that. And what I would like to show you now is just to share my screen or show it here in the stream. This is the user interface of the application, and it runs in a browser. It is it has a concept of projects. Project is a collection of rundowns and graphic templates. So you can imagine you have a morning show, which is, in color red, let's say.
Yep.
You have all the red templates are collected into the red project. Then you will start to create rundowns for your morning show, Monday rundown, Tuesday rundown, and so on.
Yep.
And on these rundowns, you can populate these rundowns with templates. And templates are items on the rundown. You can open up, edit content, and play out.
Right.
And I'm going to show you how it's done. So if we just go into an empty rundown here, so here we don't have any rundown. So we just need to add a rundown. Let's call it our first. And now from this path here, we can see that we are in a project. We are in this stupidly named project, and it's our first rundown. But it's an empty one, so we need to assign a graphic into it, an item into it, because there's nothing to play out right now. So since this is an empty project, I don't have anything to add to my rundown. So first, what I will need to assign a template to this project. And if I now go into project setting, and I can just, click an item, let's choose something very simple. All right, so now I have a single template available in this project, which is called a bug. And if I now play out the bug, it is going to show up a logo up here, so you can see the preview locally here in this window. And also there is an indicator that this specific item is running right now. I can double click this template or item on the rundown, and I can make changes to it. So if I want to change the position of the graphic, I can change it to top right. And if I take it out and bring it back in, it's going to be in the other corner right over there. These controls here comes from the template file itself. So the application doesn't have any kind of a concept of input fields. It only can support different types of input fields. These input fields can be numerical fields, text fields, text boxes, check boxes, and user interface controls such as these. And the developer who has developed the template can choose how these values are being exposed to the user here in the user interface.
And when you say developer, is it something they develop inside of this application, or is it something they do in HTML?
No, this is just the playout control application. So since we are talking about browser-based development work, so it's basically HTML5 and JavaScript. And there are some documentation how to do it, and we are improving that documentation all the time. So it will be easier for people to develop their own templates,
right.
Or of course, they can give me a call.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So this is the core idea how the application works, right. And also I have these buttons here to do additional stuff, like I can duplicate items on the rundown. There's a feature which is not been done already yet, but it is a CSV import-export functionality. So you can export a sort of like an example CSV file. Your producer can then use that example to fill in all the guests of a show, let's say,
right.
And you can bring that file back in, and it is going to generate all the instances onto the rundown. So it's super easy to create massive amount of rundowns and graphics easily.
Right.
So this is a rundown which has a ton of random stuff. So I'm just gonna start to run through those, and you will see what kind of a stuff there's gonna be coming out. Let's see. Let's stop everything first here, and let's start to go through these. So I can navigate the user interface either with a mouse, and I can click spacebar to play an item, and so on. And the application supports 20 graphics on screen at once. So up to 20 layers of graphics. And for the playout system, it is just a single source. So it's a single URL, and that URL is going to carry 20 different graphics, animated and individually controllable. This is an example of an Excel-based template. So
and for this, it is this is all being done in OBS. Is that right? This is right now.
Yeah, the compositing is done in OBS. So in OBS, we just have a single browser source.
And it's delivering these to OBS with an alpha channel over the browser?
Yes. It supports full transparency. So if I go into, let's say, this bug up here, and I can change the settings to it, so it will become, let's say, 25% opacity. So now the bug up there is more transparent.
Yep.
Okay, so let's take some of these guys out. Right. So when we are talking about HTML-based graphics, in many people's minds, it means boring boxes. It really doesn't have to be. It can be quite fancy. I mean, traditional sort of like broadcast quality graphics with all sorts of glows and lens flares and gradients and fancy non-stop looping animations.
For people who, I guess one of the things there is that how do they build them? If they're going to be like, how did you build that one? Is that all built in HTML5 or is it?
This one actually is a WebM clip. It has an in animation, a looping midpoint, and an out animation. And this specific template is just controlling the playback of this one video clip with an alpha channel.
But how do if I wanted to animate something like that, where would I do that?
You would create this in After Effects.
Okay.
Right.
And then you
and here
I
in
see.
the
So it
template,
just plays it in the template. You're adding what the text is going to be.
exactly. So if I type something here and bring it back in, so it's going to be there.
So from an After Effects perspective, you're just exporting out and what file format do you? Is it a frame sequence or is it a movie that you export?
This one is a video clip in WebM format.
Okay. And is that the format that you prefer to have it exported?
Yeah, when it comes to video clips, yes. So those are fairly small file sizes, and they render very well in browsers using full transparency.
Got it.
Here, in this example, I have this template. Let me show you from the user interface. So this template, the picture up here, is it has a text field, so text field, and a drop down which is mapped to a folder on my PC. So I can just pick another picture, and when I play it, there's going to be a different content in there.
Right.
This animation is what they called a Lottie animation. It's an SVG, animated SVG created in After Effects and exported out as a vector graphic. And in this template, I have a player which supports Lottie animations, and they run in full frame rate and in full quality, full transparency support. It's an awesome file format. Slightly tricky to work with, but it can produce excellent results.
Why is it tricky?
Because all the functionality, all the features, all the plugins, all the filters in After Effects are not supported. So you will need to know how to build up your graphics so it can be exported out as a vector file.
Right. No, that makes sense.
Yeah. Also, this client supports emojis, which is super important when it comes to social media graphics, at least.
Right.
You can have very fancy character animations, so it doesn't have to be just fade on, fade off. You can have individual characters animated randomly and stuff like that.
Yep.
And this template, for instance, it has user interface where we can choose different logos and type in something else.
Yep.
This template is a super basic one. It just shows up a picture. So you put up a full HD image with an alpha channel, and you just play it out. And in this,
all of these are just templates that come with it, or is it stuff that was built? How do people get these?
That's a good question. So the application comes with a basic template package, which has maybe I would say 8 to 10 templates. There's a store where you can get more templates. And all these templates are fully customizable, so you can, if you happen to know CSS, JavaScript, HTML, even a little bit of CSS helps. So you can change colors, fonts, sizes. Some template packs, they come with a configuration file to configure animations. So if you want your lower third to animate in from left, go out to right, or from the bottom, from the top, and so on. So you can there are some parameters in the source files where you can modify those. So I want to make clear this is not a design tool. So you would need to develop the templates and the designs elsewhere. But once they are done, you can use those designs in here. And if you happen to have existing HTML-based graphic templates, those can be used with GC as well. You will only need to add a little bit of a piece of script in there, which is going to define the user interface in the template. So that is sort of like the bridge between the user interface here and the playout graphic. So there's a little specification what needs to be done there.
Very good. We have a lot of questions stacking up, but do you have anything else to show us before?
I'm going to run through my demo here.
Yeah.
Oh, this one is quite interesting. Somebody asked about this on a forum the other day, and let's clear everything first. And I'm going to just play this from the top. So, how to do end credits, and the way it is done here in this template, which I just developed, is by adding the text here in this into this text field. So if you have this character at the end of a line, it is going to act as a what do you call that? Sort of like a headline or a group heading, if you know what I mean. And we can choose different themes.
Right.
So these themes are just CSS files, and in this user interface of the application, we can just pick another theme. So this one is for going to the left side of the screen with different colors, same content, and we can choose, give the speed. You know, this is a huge, super long end credit, like just copy and paste it from someplace. So if I now add, let's make it 12 seconds, it's going to be super, super fast.
Right. And there's no reason why this couldn't. I mean, this can definitely. I think you already stated it, but just to underline it, can play in the cloud. So you could have this running in a AWS instance.
Correct. And I already have an instance running there, and we are going to see it in a few minutes.
Okay, great.
Another concept which I just want to quickly demo here is a concept of a plugin. So the application is extendable, so it can be extended with a new functionality using plugins and extensions. So plugins are things which will show up in this user interface, and this is custom functionality which can do, you know, all sorts of stuff. Like this plugin here is actually reading all my scenes from my OBS, and I can use it as a switcher. So I can just pick another scene and it's gonna trigger that in OBS. So it can control additional software or devices, and also we can use Stream Deck.
Oh, that's one of the questions coming up.
Yeah, right.
Up,
okay.
So we'll jump into that. Yeah.
So it has an API, so we can navigate the rundown using this one, and I can pick an item and just hit play, and it's gonna play.
That's right.
And or stop, and it's gonna stop. So there's an API for it.
That's great. I think we should probably jump into the interactive one real quickly. And
yes, all right, let's do that.
And then because we won't have enough time for the questions, I think.
Right. So if you would go to this URL first.
now we put it up. This has gone out to a lot of people. So what happens if too many? I guess we'll find out really quickly here.
We will find out.
What happens if too many people get to it at one time?
So what you will find there is buttons, and these buttons should be able to control the slider on my screen here. Right? So we are seeing somebody else is controlling it. I'm not doing it. So somebody else is clicking buttons and voting the things up and down. We have already about 100 votes.
Oh, and you can multiple times. So there's a big. So it's what's interesting about it is that there's a whole lot of us clicking, and we've all now realized that we can all click multiple times.
Several times, yes. Now we have around 500 clicks already.
There's a fight here over someone trying to pull it down, and the pluses are winning. I don't know.
That's good.
I don't know.
That's where I want it. Put it up there. So I'm going to leave it there. You can play around with it while I'm going to do another demo. So another demo is going to be an extension, because as I said, you can have extensions and plugins in this application, and one of them is a social playout extension. And an extension is a piece of software which opens up in a new user interface. And this user interface, which just opened up here, is getting data from different social media sources.
Mm-hmm.
And for instance, we have Alex here, and I can play out a graphic, which, so this is a YouTube post or YouTube content. I can scroll down, I can pick another one, I can play it out. I can choose data from NASA's RSS feed. I can play out content from there.
Right.
I can go into another, let's pick a liquor manufacturer. So there's a recipe for you for today.
Right.
And so these are actually coming from in real time from social media.
Right. Right. Oh, so it's grabbing it. It can, and again, what platforms can it grab from?
Currently, what I have here, this is actually, I'm not doing the data integration into Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok. I'm using a data provider called Flockler. Let me type it up there. So Flockler is a company which aggregates data from several sources, and they publish a feed. And I'm connected to that feed. So you would have a different user interface to control your own, content, where you want to collect the data from, and then you would configure this user interface into that feed.
Right.
And the drop down here is the drop down in this user interface is the one. So each of these lines is a feed in Flockler. So this user interface is the one where you can see the content and you can drag it over to the play button and it's going to play it out.
Right.
Or you can stack those here to be played out later in the show. So if a director wants to, collect cat videos, you can collect those here and wait for, a suitable moment.
So this is one of those things that you, with Flockler, you could say just hashtag this you put a picture up on Instagram and hashtag it, and it can pull from Instagram and just give you all those images.
Exactly, that's what it's doing. So you configure all of that in the backend, and this is just the front end to control the playout of it.
Right.
And this is done. This application, this user interface, is done in cooperation with Flockler.
Right.
So they have helped me to figure out the APIs and how to collect data from their system to this user interface for broadcast purposes. And this application is actually being used in several places already.
Right. That's great. I'm still. How's our voting going? I think that the nays have. Do you still have a feed of that there? Oh, it's.
It's going. Now we are almost into 10,000.
What's interesting is such a very, very, very. What's interesting about that interaction is that a very, very small number of people have generated an enormous amount of interaction. And I beyond the conversation we're having here, I think our users should pay attention to that. This is something that we've seen a lot of, is people like starting to really engage, and there's all kinds of possibilities. For instance. We've done stuff where we've taken that information that you just put out there and, tied it into back into the physical world. And that's a interesting possibility. So, and
this is just a tech demo, it's not very meaningful. The thing what we have up here right now, but it is just a tech demo.
We're planning to report
start to
on
think
the final.
about it, how to use it.
Yeah. We're planning to report on the final results, in CNN. We're going to tell everyone how this worked out. Anyway, so that's great. I think we should jump into some of the questions. I think we've got a bunch of them. Make sure we get to them, and we'll demo some more stuff if we have time. So if you have questions, I would get them in early and vote on them often. Let's go ahead and jump into the first question.
Sure. The first one comes from George Kennedy Jr. here on the panel from Washington, D.C. Are you able to bring in YouTube chat into SPX-GC?
Not yet. That is something which is quite tricky. And I haven't, it hasn't been on my radar. So there are other service providers which can do it.
Does Flockler support YouTube chat?
I'm not sure if they support the chat. So I know that they support some features of YouTube, but I haven't looked into the chat part. But since you have to remember that this is an sort of like an open platform because we are extracting data from a web-based service. So I'm sure that there is a third-party service of some sort we can take the data out from and just visualize it.
The challenge, I can just tell you for YouTube is the certificates. So the amount of interactions you get per registered certificate is so low that if you have any significant, so it's actually relatively easy to get to the YouTube comments, but as soon as you have any real flow, you'll run out of the number of interactions you can have with YouTube at any given time.
Right. So
and it's a nightmare.
Yeah. But that's exactly the same issue with all of them. So
we don't have as much trouble with other ones like Facebook. I mean, I will admit we have a backend tool.
Right, exactly. So if you have a backend tool which has enough bandwidth and there's no limitations, so then you can just tap into that and not do it directly. So that's why, for instance, this tool is interfacing to these social media platforms through Flockler because they have the bandwidth.
Oh, absolutely. Next question.
Rotem Kish, Mazkert Batia, Israel, here on the panel today says, is it possible to change the background behind the graphics that we can use in the ATEM?
Rotem, do you want to explain what you're trying to do?
I don't want like the background to be transparent. I want like to control the color so I can key it in the in the ATEM Extreme.
Yes, there is a way to do it. So if I now just quickly show you how I would do it and how I have done it already is super basic. So we have this, remember this template which can play out images. So I believe I have something here called chroma. So there you go. So now we have an image there in the background, and if I now play out something else on top of it,
but
there you have it.
But then you can accidentally close the chroma because it's one of your instance. I want to have like solid color from behind and not transparency, so I can bring it and key it out.
True. So I think that's a quite easy for me to figure out a way to not be able to take it out from screen.
That could probably be like in the template that just says like a little button that just turns on chroma.
Yep.
So the way I'm doing it right now is I'm going to the web source and I'm going to the developer tool and I'm changing the background from transparency to like the background I want. But
I see
it's too much steps.
And again, this is where, and let me know if I'm correct here, Tuomo, but this is where a Caspar server might be more. If you wanted to get it into a traditional switcher, you'd want it because it can basically go out of a video card, right, with key fill.
Yes, absolutely. So I have the CasparCG running here. So this is the screens, what they call the screen consumer of CasparCG. Mm-hmm. So if I now play out any of the templates here, it will show up into two places. So it's going to show up here. Oh, that was a nice one because the example doesn't work, but all the other ones they do. So
but Caspar, if you had that server with a external card that did key fill, Caspar will push that out with key fill.
Correct. So I do have an SDI monitor over there, and it's doing exactly that.
Right. Absolutely.
And also you can use NDI. So you can use CasparCG to produce NDI stream with an alpha.
Right. Absolutely.
Or you can have another software-based solution to do to basically convert HTML rendering into transparent NDI stream.
What I find interesting also is that like which has me thinking about this is the inside of Media Live for Elemental. It will be able to look at it. Have you tested that at all?
No, I haven't. That has been brought into my attention, and I have read their documentation, and it clearly says that it is doable. So they do support browser sources, so it should be absolutely doable in Elemental.
And what we're looking at there is the ability to not so much run our whole show inside of Media Live, but if we want to have bugs or we want to have emergency slides or tickers that only go to the stream, that or things that we want to update that aren't necessarily as time sensitive, that we can fire those off in the cloud or fire those off literally at this level and have it just looking at that resource and keying it into the stream. So it's something we've tried to solve for a while. Next question.
Comes again from Rotem, and this time he asked, does the software have OSC commands?
No, all the interface, the API, the API for controlling the application is done through REST, HTTP REST API.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Next question.
Our friend Beju from India here on the panel this morning says, can multiple operators be working on the same rundown at the same time?
Yes, currently there is a problem. So currently they can control it, but the issue at the moment is that these indicators on the rundown are not being lit if multiple users are controlling the same rundown.
But they don't. Not everyone knows. Not everyone sees it.
Yeah,
sees
exactly. So these buttons here, they don't light up automatically.
Right.
But if you reload the page, it is going to show that status.
Next question.
But yeah, it is technically possible.
Next one up is from David Brady in New York. He says, are there any plans to leverage the Blackmagic APIs where transitions triggered on hardware can drive SPX?
I would like to think it the other way around, because I like to think it in a way that this is the user interface where you are managing and playing out your graphics, because using an ATEM to trigger graphics and input content into the templates, it's not doable. So that's why I would like to turn it the other way around. So I would like to have a button here to control ATEM.
Right. Yeah. I think that there's a lot of folks that are trying to, that run these shows from their ATEM and being able to go, oh, I want to go to something there. That makes
right.
Yeah. Next question.
George E. Kennedy Jr. here in the panel. Next says, have you been able to use a Stream Deck with SPX-GX? And I think you handled that earlier. That was the
George, did you want to ask any further question, George, about that?
So do you actually have a module for Stream Deck or no?
No, not a module. It is just, let me show you. I can show it to you how it works. So if I open up the Stream Deck app, and let's pick this one. So you cannot probably see this one, but this is using the website system function within Stream Deck. Mm-hmm. And you will need to enable the GET request in background so it doesn't open up any web browsers, and you just add the command in here what you want to trigger. And in the app there is an API. So this is the documentation about the API, that what kind of stuff you can do with external controllers. So you can move the focus around in the user interface if that is something you want to see, or you can use IDs, because all the elements on the rundown, they have a unique ID. So you can trigger these unique IDs from these buttons.
So any plans for companion?
There is actually a companion module that somebody has already developed. I haven't used it myself, but I know it exists.
Next question.
Comes from longtime show questioner Stan Chan in Roseville, California. And Stan wonders, when loading a Google Sheet data source, when is the actual data loaded, and does it use the Google API to pull that data down?
Yes, very good question. So the data is being read at the time the template is being played out. So the user interface here doesn't know anything about data, what is going to be used within the template. So the social playout extension works the other way around. So all the content is being read into the user interface and then pushed into the template for visualization. In the standard client here, or this user interface, the template itself doesn't know anything about the actual content of the data. So it only triggers the API function, and the template actually goes out and retrieves the data and acts accordingly.
And how does it, can you show us how, like, so if I've got 20 names, how do I select the right name for the lower third? So if I have an Excel file, not an Excel file, a Google Sheet, that has 20 names and titles that are on it, how does it go out and grab the 11th name?
This is a functionality which doesn't exist at the moment. So the way it will work is that you are going to have some sort of a spreadsheet with all those names in it. Mm-hmm. You import that spreadsheet into the application. It is going to generate an instance per line.
Got it. Okay. So there'll be something in the rundown that is just each person being generated into that.
Yes.
Got it. That makes sense. Next question.
Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana is up next. He says SPX-GC controls OBS. Will it do the same thing with Wirecast or vMix?
At some point, I'm sure it will. But all these things, they take time to develop, and there's a huge roadmap of things to figure out. And more integration with additional software is on that roadmap, absolutely.
Right. Next question.
Stuart Fairweather in Melbourne here on the panel says, browser-based, how would I use SPX-GC as an input to Video Ninja?
I don't have experience on it. I wouldn't know. So maybe somebody else will.
And that would still be something that you might use Video Ninja, and then that's going to go into something like OBS, right, Stuart? And then you'd key it there. You're trying to key it at the source.
Actually, I would like to bring graphics in across the internet into vMix and then go back out to Streamcast or the like. I was just thinking it'd make a really nice way with all the remote contribution that we've got to look at the moment to be able to have camera operators go to a gig, but not have to send the switcher, not have to send the graphics op, not have to send the replay, being able to do all that remotely. So if the graphics was coming remotely into vMix, and Video Ninja is really easy to get anything across the network,
but I don't think you would
without
need
having
to do
to
that
mess with
because
VPNs.
I guess that the only thing is that you only need a computer wherever you are that has the browser available, right? I mean, I think that's Tuomo can correct me if I'm wrong.
That's why
the VPN is what I was getting around. The having to configure the VPN instead, because Video Ninja you don't need to.
And do you need but you could control. Tuomo, you can let me know, but you could have a one browser in one place and another that's outputting, and how do they link up?
Well, yeah, they just need to be able to see each other. So they have to be somehow on a same network.
Okay, so they do still need a VPN, VPN or some type of thing to do that. Yeah.
And the way I brought up this diagram here is to show the fact that the outputs here are the orange boxes at the bottom, and so you can have several outputs from the server, and each one of those is basically a URL. And within that URL, you can also define which layers you want to see in that output. So if you are doing a sort of like a live event of some sort, you might want to show names in one screen and slides on another.
Right.
So you can define which layers are going to go out into which screen.
Right. Rotem?
Wow, your test, I forgot the name, like the demo is on your site. So you can, I'm guessing because you did it, you can put everything like on a site, on a web, and then you can control it from everywhere you want in the world, no?
Yes, correct. So there is a live demo on the website spxgc.com, and there is when you scroll down a little bit, there's live demo. So you can just launch the demo. It's going to ask for a username and password, and it's written here, so you don't need to remember it. And when you log into it, you can play around with it. But a word of warning: there's just one instance. So if all of you guys now went in there at the same time, it's going to be a mess because everybody else's graphics are going to be showing up on your screen because everybody are controlling the same instance.
Right. Next question.
David Brady in New York says, if a lineup order is known and rehearsed, can a simple CSV, comma separated values file of speaker name, title, and so forth be used as the data source for input?
Yes. So if you're working, I mentioned this earlier. So if you are preparing a rundown beforehand, then you can use the workflow, which is almost done. It's not there yet. That you can export, like if I have this template here and it has this export button, and when I click on this one, as you can see, there's this little tool tip down there. Yeah, sorry. So when we are on a rundown, and if I double click an item to open it, we have a delete button, duplicate button, and export button. And when I click on this export button, it is going to export a CSV file. Now it did it. I have it somewhere on my hard drive at the moment. I could go into it, I could open it up, I could fill it in, and then I would brought it back in. And when I bring it back in, it is going to generate one item per line of data in the file. Another way to use external data is to somehow control that I want to read, fifth line from that into this template. And actually this page here, this specific template, what I have open here, if I now play this, it is going to do something. It is going to show up this graphic from my Google slides. But if I go here and I change the page number into, let's say, 2, and play it, it's going to pick a different page from that Google slide.
So what happens if you have, if I've got 20 names and titles, and they update like 6 of them, and I want to re-import that? Do I just have to delete them all and do them all, or is there some way to update them?
And I believe you are talking about the CSV workflow.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So then it will generate a new
set.
A new set. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Absolutely.
It's going to append it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Go ahead, Leo.
Yeah, so my use of case of this, so just to check, I have a meeting where there can be up to 200 people. And so what we do is we have forms in advance with all the 200 people listed with their names and their who they represent. And we use a different product at the moment. We use Titler. And when we hit it with Titler, we just have to search down to find the relevant person and press go. Mm-hmm. But there's lots of limitations with that. But do you see that having 200 names on a sheet and be able to really easily find them so it's sort of like, and suddenly it's George Kennedy. As soon as George comes up, it titles him. Then I'm going to Beiju. As soon as he starts talking, we can find and press go on there.
Yeah, that is a workflow which hasn't been done in GC yet at all. So it doesn't read data from a spreadsheet sort of like live. So it doesn't. You don't have a workflow in the user interface of the application to extract data from a sheet. That you have the data file somewhere separately from the application. So it doesn't. There's no integration into that yet at all. So that's why you either will need to generate these items here first, or we will need to figure out how we could do that to figure out the workflow, how you would like to work with it. So you would modify the content within the spreadsheet if there's a change, and somehow you could flag that here and play it out. There isn't a
change. To explain, I know who all the people are, the 200 plus people in advance of the meeting. It's just more, there's a lot of data. That's 200 names. Right. And to find them, we've got to be able to fairly quickly find them. So Ari, it's great. He starts with an A. So does Alex, but Kenny's a bit harder. And Stuart, he's all the other way down the other end of the list.
Yes, I understand what you mean. So here, the way I would do it is that I would bring those in before the show. I would bring those into here as individual items, and then the template will preview here the first things what have been entered into the template. So you can see from this user interface. Sorry,
But it could take a live feed. It could take a live input from a web page, right? Like just if it was a raw page or an RSS feed or something like that. So, what I would probably do is do something that was going to generate some raw data onto a page and have it subscribe to that. So that I wouldn't necessarily do it in the system, but I would do it in something that would just generate a raw data feed of this is the next one.
Yeah, that's one way to do it. Absolutely.
Because then you have a ton of controls over, because you could start just typing someone's name, and you could have, you could use tools that would let you just start typing someone's name, and it just starts showing you here's the 5, the 3, the 2, the 1, and then you hit go, and it just automatically puts that onto a web page that then it sees automatically. I mean, that would probably be in the current system. That probably is like a progressive search.
That is absolutely one way to do it. Mm-hmm. But the graphics is pretty difficult because there are so many workflows and use cases and different environments. In some environments, you don't have internet, so you need to be working offline completely, and but it's doable. Everything is doable.
Next question.
Moving on, Douglas Carmichael is up next. He says, could you link the voting slider to Makana to display real-time question status during the show?
We would definitely be able to do that. I mean, we can publish any of the data that we have in there. So again, this would get exactly to what we were just talking about. It would put up a page that SPX-GC. Okay, good at this.
Just put GC, easy.
GC would go and grab and pull back in. Next question.
Comes from Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana, and Chris asks, how exactly did you set up the polling?
They are running on the same server. So the page you saw, these buttons, this is the URL. It's from a server, an online SPX-GC instance, and this page is sending messages back to the server. The server is sending messages to the graphic. So there's a live connection between these buttons and the graphic.
Right. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael back again with, I know that SpaceX has their stream graphics driven by real-time data. Can SPX-GC take in real-time data sources?
Funny you should mention it, because those graphics what SpaceX is using are done by me in some of their launches. Not all of them, but in some of them, and they are not using SPX-GC to control the graphics. But it is absolutely doable that you have templates which are getting real-time updates several times a second and updating those on screen.
Yeah, and this gets back into exactly what we were talking about before, of just having some space that it's getting written to. When we do racing data, that's kind of what's happening, is we're getting that data, and as fast as it comes in, there's a new page. The page is just being constantly updated, and the graphic just goes and says, "I'm going to grab this number and format it, into this thing." Next question.
Rotem Kish is back with another one. This time, what is your business model?
Good question. So currently, since this is a free open source application, my income comes from custom work for business clients. So I'm doing extensions in different workflows, and there's also on the website there is a store where you can buy some additional functionality to the application, like more templates. But this is something which is we have big plans. Let's put it that way.
and for the templates that you sell, is that a marketplace? Can other people post
Not yet.
templates?
That's something which is gonna be there one day. Not quite yet, but absolutely, that is part of the business plan. Is to open that store up as a marketplace.
Absolutely. Next question.
Morgan Price in Victoria, British Columbia, up next with, what kind of delay is there if we would insert SPX-GC between ATEM's USB-C video and Zoom for example, using OBS or others?
I think it'd probably be a frame or two.
Yeah.
Well, it's the delay of OBS, so actually it could be a lot more.
It's a video processing question really. So there's no delay when it comes to triggering graphics.
Yeah, but it would definitely the processing there would be just the internal OBS delays. Next question.
David Brady in New York wonders if there will be a software development kit or an application programming interface for this available.
Yes, SDK is something which we will be working on very soon, because if you think about the concept of a marketplace, it requires it. So otherwise, people cannot create a content for this environment if there's no documentation and support for it. So absolutely, there's going to be SDK for it.
Next question.
Stuart in Melbourne is back again saying, polling. Can you tell how many people were hitting each button? Is it granular enough to see the votes by IP address? Identify the super voters.
It's not set up like that, but I'm sure it could be done if needed. But yeah, I haven't thought about it. We just have this toy up here. We have over 50,000 clicks already. So thanks for the clicks. We are heavily in the red region.
That's great. That's great.
There's some script kids in here somewhere. Must have written an auto clicker.
That might be my fault. I've got 2 mouse buttons to press, and I stopped on the nose at about 7,100.
Thank you, Stuart.
That's great. Tuomo, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me. This has been great.
Yeah. I think that it's a really, really interesting application, and we're constantly trying to figure out all the best ways to use different graphics apps and how we integrate them. And I think that the kind of the open nature of it, and again, it's tie-in to being able to tie it back into something like Caspar as a server. I didn't realize how separate those were, or that you can control them both at the same time. So that's really,
right.
really
so
interesting.
CasparCG is not needed. It's just an optional workflow.
Right, and that would give you the kind of the more formal key fill out if you wanted to use it.
Yeah, that's a very easy way to set it up like that. Yes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Chad's here. We're gonna have Chad put in a SPX-GC in the forum, so under graphics, so with the other ones there. So hopefully, Tuomo, you can join us in Discord and answer questions as people start to play with it. Hopefully, we'll.
I will be there 24/7.
Very good. Thanks again so much for coming and joining us. And thanks to Rotem, who introduced us and had us talk. I know that we were Tuomo and I had talked that we've been in the same sphere for a long time. So it was really good to actually get to meet you. So thank you so much, and for the producers, thank you for the time and the great questions and keeping the whole conversation moving. Again, yet 500 and whatever number of times in a row, and for the panelists, thank you so much for your contribution and being here for the first hour and second hour, asking questions and answering them. All right, we're going to tomorrow. Remember, we're going to talk about Keynote. Live video inside of a presentation tool. What? So anyway, we're going to talk about that a little bit and kind of work through that. And for now, we're going to jump into after hours for the next 21 hours.